He knocked my framed graduation photo off the table with a careless flick of his wrist, and it slid across the wooden deck before shattering into glittering shards. My 11-year-old cousin clapped like it was a magic trick and chirped, "Guess you should have tried harder, Aunt Daisy." Everyone burst into laughter, sharp, thoughtless, echoing under the warm Idaho evening lights. But my mother's laugh rose above all of them, bright and cruel, the kind that didn't match her carefully arranged smile. I stood there holding a plastic fork, staring at the pieces of my own face scattered across the floor, wondering when their love had transformed into performance and punishment. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stepped away from the table, their laughter following me down the deck stairs like a mocking soundtrack. Hours later, in the quiet of my Portland apartment, my phone lit up with a message I thought would be an apology. But it was. It was a sentence cold enough to freeze the room. "We're done with you. Don't contact us again." A tiny heart appeared beneath it from my sister. I typed one line back, and it was like shifting a boulder that had been sitting on my life for years. Earlier that day, the backyard looked flawless, string lights swaying above, the smell of grilled corn drifting through the breeze, people talking in soft, cheerful tones. But underneath that pretty layer, the tension pulsed like an electric wire. Mom moved through the yard the way she always did, shoulders lifted, voice sweet, a perfect hostess hiding the cracks beneath her heels. My sister Brianna glowed in a new pale pink jumpsuit, her son Tyler glued to her side as she bragged about their California vacation. "Mom treated us," she said, flipping her hair. "She insisted we stay longer." Mom tilted her head like humility was a joke she played well. "They deserved a break," she said while adjusting the napkins. I smiled the way polite people do when they're used to being invisible. No one asked about Portland. No one asked about my degree. Near the drink table sat a small chocolate cake, pushed to the side beside crumpled napkins and half-empty soda cans. "Congrats, Daisy," the gold frosting read, the letters smudged, the candle slightly bent. People walked past it, bumping it, shifting it, forgetting it. I stared at it longer than I should have because something about it felt too familiar, pretty enough to display, easy enough to ignore. A breeze rustled the lights overhead, and for a fleeting second I imagined maybe this time they'd see me, maybe this time they ask. But then Tyler sprinted toward me, mischief bright in his eyes. "Aunt Daisy," he shouted. "Mom says you only went to college so you can brag to people." The laughter that erupted wasn't laughter at all. It was a blade disguised as sound. Mom didn't correct him, and Brianna didn't even try to hide her smirk behind her sparkling cider. Then Tyler bumped the table hard, and my little cake toppled off the edge in slow motion. Plate shattered. Frosting splattered across my shoes. Gasps turned to giggles, then full laughter again. I stood frozen, my bent plastic fork trembling in my hand. My father didn't look up from his phone. Mom's voice floated through the noise, mocking and soft. "Oh, Daisy, don't be dramatic. It's just a cake." So I put the fork down, turned, walked away. Every step felt like I was peeling myself out of an old version I no longer fit. Driving home through the dark highway, my windshield smeared with rain, the words repeated in my head, "Just a cake, just sensitive, just Daisy." By the time I stepped into my apartment, soaked and exhausted, I felt hollow. I sank onto the couch, and then my phone buzzed with that message cutting me loose like I was a rope they'd been waiting to drop. Not a single apology. Not a shred of remorse. I opened my laptop and my budget sheet glowed blue in the dim room. 2 lines were highlighted, Mom and Dad's home loan, Brianna's car loan, both co-signed by me, both paid monthly by me. I'd become their safety net long before I ever became an adult, money disguised as love, responsibility disguised as loyalty. I scrolled through years of messages, guilt-laced requests, promises that never arrived, apologies that never meant change. And something inside me shifted from sadness into clarity. I typed a message to them, short, calm, final. "I'm removing myself from every loan tomorrow." No emotion, no smiley, just truth. That morning, their calls started desperate, angry, relentless. My mother's voicemails were furious. My father's were cold. My sisters were panicked. "You're ruining our lives," they shouted. "You owe us." Not one said, "We're sorry." Instead, I got dressed, tied my hair back, and walked into Green First Bank in downtown Portland. Mr. Harris, a soft-spoken man with silver hair and glasses, welcomed me into an office painted a muted gray-blue. He listened as I explained. "I co-signed 2 loans," I said. "I've been paying them for years. I need out." He nodded gently. "You're not the first person I've met whose family confuses financial dependence with love." He reviewed my documents, my lease, pay stubs, message screenshots, even an old text from Mom saying, "You're not part of the house, you just helped sign." He looked up. "We have everything we need." When he stamped the final page releasing me from both loans, I swear the sound echoed like a door slamming shut behind me and another opening somewhere ahead. Outside, the wind stung my cheeks, but inside my chest, something felt strangely warm, relief or rebirth, I wasn't sure. I grabbed a latte from the cafe on the corner. The barista smiled and said, "Hope your day gets better." And I finally meant it when I replied, "It already is." That evening, as I sprinkled Parmesan over boiling pasta, my phone lit up again. A flood of messages: "You're heartless, you destroyed us, you'll pay for this." I typed one calm line back: "I stopped paying for people who never clapped when I stood up." Then I set the phone aside. 3 days later, they showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door, screaming, demanding, crying. My mother shouted, "You ruined our credit, Daisy, open this door." Brianna sobbed, "My car's being repossessed, do you think this is funny?" Their voices vibrated the thin hallway walls. I didn't move. I called the police quietly. 2 individuals refusing to leave my door. Yes, I know them. Today they're trespassers. When the officers arrived, my mother insisted she had rights because I was her child. The officer shook his head calmly. "She's an adult, you need to leave." Mom glared at the door. "You'll regret this, Daisy, blood is blood." But I stayed silent. I stayed still. And they left under the wash of red-blue lights, their steps fatting until the building fell quiet again. I slid to the floor, back against the wall, hands trembling with a strange, beautiful release. The next morning, the smear campaign began, Facebook posts claiming I stole from them, comments from relatives calling me ungrateful. Lies stacked on lies. Instead of fighting it, I sent a simple email to my team. "If you see anything online, please ignore it." Some people fight boundaries with stories. Thank you for respecting my privacy. 3 days later, a gold-sealed envelope arrived. A letter from the bank, full release granted, co-signer liability removed. It felt like holding freedom on paper. That evening, Mom's accusatory post vanished. Someone must have shown her the truth. I didn't care. My phone buzzed one last time with a message from an unknown number. "You think you've won? You'll regret this." But I smiled faintly at the reflection in my window as Portland's skyline shimmered beneath me. Winning had never been the point. Peace was. Weeks passed. My life softened into something quiet and steady. Morning coffee, yoga, laughter with friends who saw me, not what I could give. Work blossomed, and one day my supervisor said, "Daisy, people feel safe with you. You bring calm." No one had ever said that without expecting something in return. Months later, Mr. Harris emailed me a photo of the framed release letter displayed in the bank as an example of healthy boundary cases. I laughed, sipping tea by the window. I was finally living a life that couldn't be used against me. A year later, Brianna sent 6 words: "I'm sorry for everything." No excuses. No explanations. I stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone down. Forgiveness didn't have to mean reopening doors. Sometimes it meant closing them softly and walking forward. Outside, the Portland sky glowed in soft orange hues as the river reflected the last light of day. I whispered, "Welcome back to yourself, Daisy." And for the first time, I believed it. Lauren didn't stop, not because she was strong, but because the momentum of the truth kept dragging her forward like a river that refused to let anyone climb out. Pages kept sliding from her hands to the floor, forming a carpet of evidence around our feet. At some point, the room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if every lie Mason had ever told was slowly taking physical shape, pressing down on us. The discovery file wasn't just paperwork. It was a biography of a man spiraling, told through timestamps, transaction codes, and digital footprints that exposed parts of him none of us were ready to see. There were screenshots of chats where he swore he'd pay people back, tomorrow without fail. But tomorrow never came. PDFs showing overdraft fees stacked like dominoes, and emails from betting apps congratulating him on hitting silver tier. A reward that looked more like a badge of destruction than achievement. We found bank statements where deposits sat for less than an hour before being siphoned out in frantic, back-to-back bets, sometimes placed within seconds of each other, as if he couldn't even breathe between risks anymore. A therapist's report was tucked inside too, buried deep, describing compulsive escapism behavior, officially diagnosing what everyone had only whispered about behind closed doors. And then came the messages to his ex, written at 4 a.m., where Mason promised he had changed, only to send another message 12 minutes later asking her to cover a bill, just this once. There were patterns everywhere, cycles of regret, bursts of hope, and then an inevitable crash that dragged him lower each time. Lauren's hand froze when she reached an email thread between Mason and a payday loan company, where he'd borrowed money using collateral he didn't even own. I watched her shoulders sink as she realized he hadn't just gambled with money. He'd gambled with trust, relationships, and futures that didn't belong to him alone. The room filled with the soft hum of the ceiling fan, but even that felt too loud in the middle of all this unraveling. She turned another page, and a blurry photocopy of a pawn ticket stared back at us. Mason had pawned a watch his father gave him, the one he once swore he'd never touch no matter what. The timestamp showed he pawned it the morning after promising his father he was finally getting clean. And then, almost cruelly, there came the bank footage stills, grainy images of Mason at an ATM, hood up, withdrawing money with the kind of numb expression someone gets when they've stopped believing they can save themselves. Every photo felt like another nail in the coffin of the version of him we used to know. And in that suffocating silence, something broke, not the kind that echoes loudly, but the quiet, painful crackle of hope disintegrating. Lauren sat down on the floor, right on top of the documents, like she didn't care what she crushed anymore. "He wasn't trying to fix anything," she whispered, voice trembling. "He was just trying to stay ahead of the next collapse." And she was right. The deeper we dug, the more obvious it became. Mason wasn't living life anymore. He was surviving disaster to disaster, convincing himself that the next bet, the next lie, the next borrowed dollar would finally be the one that saved him. The discovery file revealed even more. Subscription charges to meditation apps he used for 3 days before abandoning, screenshots of motivational quotes he sent to himself at dawn, and voice notes where he cried quietly between sentences, trying to sound stable for the people he loved, but failing so badly it hurt to hear. But the part that hit the hardest was the final section, a detailed timeline created by the investigators. Every lie he told aligned perfectly with a financial hit. Every apology came right after he lost big. Every sudden promise to do better followed a withdrawal so large even the bank flagged it. His entire emotional landscape was tied to wins and losses, highs and crashes, like he was a puppet tugged around by numbers on a screen. And suddenly, looking at the pile of papers stretching across the room, the puzzle came together in the ugliest way possible. Mason hadn't been hiding a problem. He had become the problem, swallowed whole by something he thought he could control, but that had been controlling him for years. Lauren's eyes turned glassy, but she kept reading, almost punishing herself with the truth. She whispered each line like it was being carved into her, realizing that the man she defended, the man she convinced everyone just needed support, had been building a second life in the shadows, a life stitched together with panic, secrecy, and desperation. And as I watched her, surrounded by the wreckage of someone else's choices, I understood something I never had before. Sometimes betrayal doesn't explode in one moment. Sometimes it leaks slowly, quietly, until one day you're left drowning in evidence that the person you cared about had been disappearing piece by piece long before you even noticed. Lauren's breathing grew uneven, shallow, like the weight of every page was pressing directly against her ribs. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. There was a grim determination in her eyes now, the kind people get when they finally understand the full shape of a disaster they've been trying to outrun. She reached for another stack, this one bound with a thick black clip, and when she opened it, the entire room seemed to tilt. It was a chronological reconstruction of Mason's last 11 months, every transaction, every message, every login, every lie, organized, highlighted, annotated. It wasn't just evidence, it was a map of a man's unraveling, step by painful step. The first pages looked almost normal, small debts, missed bills, a few late-night bets. But then the slope steepened. The numbers got bigger. The bets got riskier. The loans became constant. There were entire weeks where it looked like he barely slept, placing bets at 3:12 a.m., 4:07 a.m., 4:51 a.m., like he was chasing something he could never quite reach. And then, in the margin, an investigator's note in red ink, "Pattern consistent with escalating compulsive gambling behavior." The words felt cold, clinical, almost too clean for the chaos they described. Lauren's hand hovered over a section with yellow tabs. Important events. She opened the first one, and her face fell. It was the week Mason promised he was finally turning things around, the week he told everyone he was done with all that. But the documents showed something different. 5 loan applications in 3 days, 2 declined, 3 approved. A $1,200 withdrawal at 2:18. A betting account deposit exactly 13 minutes later. And then a string of messages he sent that same morning, telling his mother he was proud of himself for making progress. Lauren flinched, not dramatically, not loudly, just a small, shattering twitch of the eyelid like something inside her had finally cracked. Then came the next tab, light blue. Notable contacts. Screenshots of conversations popped out. Texts where Mason promised to pay people back by Friday, by next week, by first thing in the morning. Messages he sent to Lauren, sweet, hopeful, full of promises, juxtaposed against transactions made minutes before or after, proving every word he said was built on top of another lie. There was one message where he told her, "I'm trying, I swear, you make me better." But right before sending it, the report showed a $600 deposit into an online casino, and 15 minutes later, a total wipeout. Lauren swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. "He used me as a good luck charm." Her words trembled, thick with realization. The next section was almost worse. Collateral. It listed everything Mason had sold or pawned. Headphones he'd bought himself as a birthday gift, a jacket his brother gave him, even a guitar he hadn't touched in years but insisted he would never get rid of because it meant too much. And there, in the middle, was an entry that made Lauren cover her mouth with her hand, a ring box. The ring he once said was for someday when things get better. Pawned. The day after he told her, he'd been saving for their future. Her shoulders sagged like her entire frame was folding in on itself. But the documents kept going. We found the digital behavior logs, dozens of deleted searches, how to stop gambling fast, gambling ruined my life, how much debt is too much debt, can gambling addiction be hidden from family? One search repeated 4 times across the same night. Why do I keep lying? It was heartbreaking because it wasn't for anyone else, it was for himself. A man begging a search engine for an explanation for his own collapse. And then buried deep, almost intentionally, another series of screenshots. Voice memos Mason recorded privately, not sent to anyone, just stored. Tiny windows into nights where his guilt swallowed him whole. Some were short, little gasps where he whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," like a loop he couldn't break. Some were longer, rambling, shaky confessions where he begged the universe for one more chance, one more win, one more moment to fix everything before the whole thing came crashing down. At the end of one recording, he said so quietly it barely registered, "I don't know how to stop." Lauren closed her eyes at that one, and for the first time I saw something shift, her anger softening, not into forgiveness, but into a kind of exhausted grief. Because understanding someone's destruction doesn't excuse it, but it changes the shape of the pain. It gives the wreckage a voice. The last section was the cruelest. Projected outcome without intervention. A cold, unforgiving analysis, numbers, models, graphs, all showing the same conclusion. Mason was weeks, maybe days, away from financial collapse so absolute it would have taken years to recover, if he ever could. And yet in those same days, he had been smiling in photos, showing up at dinners, sending long, affectionate messages to Lauren like nothing was wrong. Living 2 lives at once, the one everyone saw, and the one the documents revealed in brutal detail. When Lauren finally looked up, her eyes were rimmed red, her hands shaking. She wasn't just reading Mason's collapse. She was witnessing the moment the version of him she loved stopped existing. A slow disappearance written in data, screenshots, and digital dust. She whispered, "How do you love someone who's been gone this long and you didn't even notice?" There was no answer. Just the rustle of papers on the floor, the fan humming, and the truth settling around us like a storm finally running out of rain.